Quite often, we tend to overlook some of the greatest aspects of any empire or civilization compared to today's fast-moving and so-called technical advances. But does that mean that their contribution to today's cultural and technological advancements is nothing? And at times, if we come across any ancient mound or fort, that's when we relish the ancient times and praise the technological achievements of that time. But are we learning something from the past and carrying it on to the future? Or are we leaving behind something very valuable and in the process losing the very core identity of what makes the place and people unique? This is a land with a history dating back to thousands of years. The land which has the longest coastal belt in India. The land which houses the world's most visited temple. The land where once upon a time diamonds were sold on streets. And the land whose language is called Italian of the East. The recorded history of Andhra Pradesh can be traced back to the times of Iron Age, the Mahajanapada. But the archaeological monuments and references in epics like Mahabharata and Ramayana suggest that humans were here much before that, forming small groups, kingdoms, and eventually empires. There are some references about an Andhra kingdom and the people called Andhras in Sanskrit epics Mahabharata, Ramayana, Puranas and Buddhist Jataka tales. Rukmini from Mahabharata was from kingdom of Vidarbha, which stretched most of South India including Andhra, Karnataka, Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh. In epic Ramayana, legendary King Rama had spent time in the forests of Andhra during his exile period. The saint who became a god, Gautama Buddha, had also visited the land of Andhra, Amravati, and preached at Dharanikota or Dhanya Katakam. There he performed Kala Chakra ceremony, which takes the history of Amravati and the land of Andhra all the way back to 500 BCE. According to one of the Buddhist monk writing, this is what happened. On the full moon of the month Chaitra, in the year following his enlightenment, at the great stupa of Dhanya Kataka, the Buddha emanated the mandala of the glorious lunar mansions. Till that time, the land of Andhra was a small place and didn't have any importance other than formation of some local religious cults, and not much recorded evidence is found. But as in the case of every civilization, the wheel of change here was also war, and it was the Mauryan Empire which was forged by many bloody wars that truly recognized the land of Andhra as a part of its kingdom. It was from that time things started changing rapidly for the people of this land. As the fall of the Mauryan Empire began, the rise of Andhra as a cultural and political state began, and the first in line to take this lineage further were the Satavahanas. was not Hinduism, but Buddhism. The kings still performed all the Vedic rituals and they followed the Vedic religion. Religion was purely the choice of the people. The Buddhist stupas constructed by the Satavahanas at Amravati still stand today in testament of the great kings and the craftsmen who built them. Chinese traveler and Buddhist monk Huang Sang visited Amravati in 640 CE, stayed for some time and studied Abhidhamma Pitakam. He observed that there were many viharas and some of them were deserted, which points out that Hinduism was gaining ground at that time. Gautami Putra Satakarni was the last successful king of that period. Soon after his death, the decline of the Satavahanas began. 4 or 5 kings of Gautami Putra Satakarni's line succeeded him and continued to rule till about mid-200 CE. However, the dynasty was soon extinguished following the rise of its feudatories, perhaps on account of a decline in central power. But the cultural and political impact that Satavahanas left on this land can still be felt today in the streets of Amravati and the Godavari Valley. A very little known fact is that the Mahayana Buddhism may have originated in Andhra and taken to different parts of Asia by the Satavahanas. As one of the sayings go, what goes up has to come down. Within a span of around 500 years, the Satavahanas established the very first empire in the lands of Andhra, or we may put it as the first empire in South India. But the decline of the dynasty left Andhra in a political chaos. Many local rulers carved small kingdoms out of the empire, and the most important one of these small kingdoms were the Ikshvakus, who for the next few centuries will write new chapters in the eternal history of Andhra. Ikshvaku was the eldest son of Manu, the great patriarch of ancient India, who had 9 sons. Capital for the Ikshvaku king was Ayodhya. He had 100 sons and Vikushi was the eldest. Of the rest, 50 sons founded small principalities in northern India. 48 of his sons migrated to the south and carved out kingdoms for themselves. That's how it is believed that Ikshvakus came to the land of Andhra, and they became one of the most important dynasties that influenced the culture and the landscape of Andhra. Andhra Ikshvakus were originally feudatories of the Satavahanas and bore the title Mahatalavara. Archaeological evidence has suggested that the Andhra Ikshvakus immediately succeeded the Satavahanas. They ruled the eastern Andhra country along the Krishna river during the later half of the 2nd century CE, and the kingdom they established stretched from Krishna river valley to the borders of the current state Maharashtra, with Vijayapuri as their capital. By around the later half of the 2nd century CE, this was the strongest kingdom and on its way to become an empire. The rule of Ikshvaku kings brought about major changes in the cultural aspects. Buddhism flourished and they chose one of the biggest Buddhist sites in South India as their capital, Nagarjunakonda, or Vijaypuri as it was called back then. The site was once the location of many Buddhist universities and monasteries, attracting students from Gandhara in the present-day Afghanistan, Bengal, Sri Lanka, and from as far as China. It is named after Nagarjuna, a southern Indian master of Mahayana Buddhism, who lived in the 2nd century AD, who is believed to have been responsible for the Buddhist activity in the area. Nagarjuna was the exponent of the philosophy of Shunyata or void. At that time, Buddhism often spread to Sri Lanka and Burma, after using the area and the bustling Bay of Bengal ports of Andhra to restock for the impending journey. Archaeological inscriptions at the site show that Sri Veerapurusha, the second ruler of the Ikshvaku dynasty, was a Buddhist, as were his son Ehuvala and their descendants. Construction of temples and monasteries was done through the funding of the Queen of Ikshvaku. Shanti Siri in particular is recorded as having funded the building of the main stupa for 10 consecutive years. The support also spread beyond the noble classes. Many non-royal names were also involved. At its peak, there were more than 30 monasteries, and it was the largest Buddhist center in South India. The region declined after the death of Rudrapurusha, the last Ikshvaku king. Excavations began in 1927 and the first finds were made by English archaeologists in 1928. The excavations were continuous until 1931. They unearthed the ruins of stupas and chaityas in 1926 at what was once an immense center for Buddhist learning in ancient India. The original place of the monastery lies under the waters of the river Krishna now. Ikshvakus were not only involved in development of Buddhism and construction of temples and monasteries, but also sea trade. The attraction for this Buddhist center can be accounted for from the sea trade which was carried on between Lanka and the Andhra Ikshvakus through the ports situated on the mouths of the river Krishna and the Godavari. Ikshvaku king Rudrapurusha ruled for more than 11 years. He was probably the last important ruler for the Andhra Ikshvaku family. After him, there were 3 more unknown rulers according to the Puranas. Around 278 CE, the Abhiras might have put an end to the Ikshvakus. So, the second largest empire of the Andhra came to an end around 278 BCE. Does that mean the history of Andhra stopped? The lineage continued as another clan of kings arose and took the history forward. They were the Brihatpalayanas. Soon after the decline of the Ikshvaku dynasty, the Brihatpalayanas took over. They didn't conquer the Ikshvaku Empire, but were trying to take forward the legacy of the Ikshvaku kings, and in turn making their mark on the lands they ruled. The only known king of this dynasty, Jayavarma, a princess of his family, was married to the Andhra Ikshvaku king. Jayavarma ruled in the last quarter of the 3rd century AD, from about 278 AD to about 288 AD in the region covered by present-day Machilipatnam and Gudivada areas of Krishna district and Repalle and Tenali area of Guntur district with Kudura as capital. This Kudura has been identified with Koduru village near Machilipatnam in Krishna district. The rule of Brihatpalayanas on the Andhra land was very short, a very small but significant time when they tried to carry forward the pride and splendor of Ikshvakus. After the death of Jayavarma, the Ananda Gotrikas occupied his territory to the south of the Krishna river, and the Salankayanas took his territory north of the river. The rule of both Ananda Gotrikas and the Salankayanas was also very short, and recorded history doesn't have much information about the two kingdoms. But the significance of Salankayanas' kingdom was the clear demarcation of languages. Clear demarcation in terms of scripting started, and all the South Indian and North Indian languages were separated to make way for one language, which would be called the Italian of the East by the British. The language was Telugu. From its very humble beginnings in the period of Salankayanas to being the 14th most spoken language in the world, Telugu has come a long way. And it was an effort of many hundreds of years and many great empires who made Telugu their own, preserved it and passed it on to our generation. The exact time and place from where Telugu language started is not known for certain. It is thought to have been derived from Trilinga, as in Trilinga Desa, the country of the three lingas. According to a Hindu legend, Trilinga Desa is the land in between three Shiva temples, namely Kaleshwaram, Srisalam and Draksharamam. Trilinga Desa forms the traditional boundaries of the Telugu region. The people who lived in these regions were also referred to as Telaga caste, seems to have been derived from Trilinga Desa. Other forms of the word such as Telunga, Telinga, Telangana and Tenunga were also seen. The first Telugu inscriptions were found on coins in Kotilingala, Andhra Pradesh. Inscriptions containing Telugu words dated back to 400 BCE were discovered in Bhattiprolu in Guntur district. The first available Telugu inscription in the coastal Andhra Pradesh comes from about 633 CE. Around the same time, the Chalukya kings of Telangana also started using Telugu for inscriptions. Telugu was most exposed to the influence of Sanskrit as opposed to Prakrit during this period. This period mainly corresponds to the advent of literature in Telugu. Now we jump forward 100 years. After the rule of both Ananda Gotrikas and Salankayanas, the new phase of history is to be written on the lands of Andhra, not by wars or literature, but by architecture. And those rulers were called the Vishnukundinas. Vishnukundinas were a dynasty that ruled over the eastern Deccan in South India, comprising of the area covered by modern-day Andhra Pradesh and Kalinga. It played an important role in the history of the Deccan during the 5th and 6th centuries AD. As the wheels of change turned on, the land of Andhra was very much in need of its own identity. Long has it been ruled along with other linguistic states, and long has been its struggle for identity. And that identity was given by the Eastern Chalukyas and literary spheres of Andhra society. During this period, the Telugu language emerged as a literary medium subsuming the predominance of Prakrit and Sanskrit. As a result, Andhra achieved an identity and a distinction of its own. The Eastern Chalukyas were a branch of the Chalukyas of Badami. Pulakesin II conquered Vengi near Eluru in 624 and installed his brother Kubja Vishnuvardhana as its ruler. His dynasty, known as the Eastern Chalukyas, ruled for nearly 4 centuries in all. Vishnuvardhana extended his dominions up to Srikakulam in the north and Nellore in the south, and made a predecessor to the current Andhra state. And when time came for a separate Andhra state after independence from the British, what best reference of boundaries can one get other than the empire formed by the Eastern Chalukyas? The Eastern Chalukyas occupied a prominent place in the history of Andhra Pradesh. Since the time of Gunaga Vijayaditya in 848, inscriptions show Telugu stanzas culminating in the production of literary works in the coming centuries. Later in the 11th century, the Mahabharata was translated partly in the 12th century, the Eastern Chalukyas was split into several local kingdoms. The empire and the dynasty, which gave Andhra its first map and an official language, came to an end. But fate had a very glorious future for Andhra. If Eastern Chalukyas made a linguistic and geographical impact, the cultural change that was about to happen would change the landscape and the history of Andhra forever. The bearers of the change were the Kakatiyas, and along with them came the Muslim conquest of Andhra. The Kakatiyas' ascent to power can be traced to the region of the Western Chalukyas. Kakatiya Gundaya, a subordinate of the Eastern Chalukya monarch, Amma II established the Kakatiya dynasty. The dynasty's name comes either from its association with a town known as Kakatipura, since the kings bore the title Kakatipura Vallabha, or from their worship of a goddess called Kakati. So it is believed Kakatipura could be another name for Warangal itself. A little known fact is that the kings who established the Kakatiya Empire are actually from Sudra caste. Their ascent from an ordinary Sudra caste to establishing one of the biggest empires of Andhra is a testimony for human willpower and the extraordinary heights that one can reach through conviction and dedication. Gundaya was the first prominent person of the Kakatiya dynasty. He sacrificed his life in the service of the Rashtrakuta ruler Krishna II while fighting against the Eastern Chalukyas. The grateful Krishna II placed Gundaya's son Eriya in charge of Kuravadi near Warangal. This kingdom was created as a check on the Mudigonda Chalukyas on the eastern borders of the Rashtrakuta. This was the emergence of the Kakatiya dynasty in its own right. It was Rudrama who was the king from 1158 to 1195. He consolidated the basic structure of the empire by waging many wars across the length and breadth of the Andhra region. He expanded it in such a way that the empire needed a second capital, and the monument which till today stands as a testament to their excellent craft is the Warangal Fort. In the last year of his reign, he came into conflict with the Yadavas of Devagiri. Rudrama suffered defeat and death in his encounter with Jaitrapala I. After Rudrama's death and the imprisonment of his nephew Ganapati in the hands of the Yadavas, his younger brother Mahadeva ascended the throne and ruled the kingdom for a short span of about 3 years. He led an expedition against the Yadava kingdom to avenge Rudra's death and also to release his son Ganapati. He lost his life in the battle. The next important ruler to really make an effort to unite the whole Andhra Desha was Ganapati Deva. Ganapati Deva's reign lasted for 62 years. It is one of the most brilliant epochs in history. Ganapati during his long reign brought under his sway almost the whole land inhabited by the Telugu-speaking people. Ganapati Deva was known as the greatest of the Kakatiyas and the first after Satavahanas to bring the entire Telugu area under one rule. He put an end to the rule of the Cholas in the year 1210. He established order in his vast dominion and encouraged trade. It is also around this period that the Golconda Fort was constructed, as well as beautiful temples in the Kakatiya art form such as Ramappa Temple at the tiny village of Palampet outside of Warangal. Those constructions still exist today, and one can stumble upon the grand history that Warangal had once upon a time. It's only up to us to truly recognize and respect its culture, art, and administrative traits of that time. Though Ganapati Deva was alive until 1269, he handed over the threads of administration to a person whom no one expected to be a ruler. But that person became a ruler and turned out to be the most influential and important ruler of all times. And the person was not a man, but a woman. She was Rani Rudrama Devi, daughter of Ganapati Deva. Rudrama Devi was one of the very few queens in Indian history. She was born as Rudrama to Ganapati Deva, who had no sons. She was formally designated as a son through the ancient Putrika ceremony and given the male name of Rudradeva and declared the queen. Rudrama Devi was married to Veerabhadra, Eastern Chalukyan prince of Nidadavolu. Despite initial misgivings by some of her generals who resented a female ruler, she suppressed the internal rebellions and external incursions. An able fighter and ruler, Rudrama defended the kingdom from the Cholas and the Yadavas, earning their respect. She remains one of the few female powers of South India for all time. As the social structure of those days didn't permit a woman being a queen and ruling man, throughout the rule of Rudrama Devi, there were many rebellions, and it was in one of these rebellion fights with Kayastha chief Ambadeva that she succumbed to the fury of the enemies. Though her rule as a queen was very short-lived, she was the first queen of Andhra Pradesh. The courage and strength she showed to rule an empire will always be an inspiration for future generations. Her adopted son Prataparudra took over the reins of the empire from there and continued the rule. But as the wise men say, a strong empire or civilization cannot be easily destroyed by outsiders. The destruction always starts from inside. Same was the case of the Kakatiya Empire. The destruction started with rebellions, and adding fuel to the fire were the Muslim conquests. The conquest of South India by the Delhi Sultanate started in 1296 CE, when Alauddin Khilji, the son-in-law and commander of Sultan Jalaluddin, raided and plundered Maharashtra. Khilji subsequently murdered the Sultan and took to Delhi. The last known king of Kakatiya Empire in Andhra committed suicide, and after that the Kakatiyas moved out of Andhra and established a kingdom in present-day Chhattisgarh, and Andhra lost one of its glorious empires by both rebellions from inside and the Muslim conquests from outside. The demise of Kakatiya dynasty resulted in confusion and anarchy under alien rulers for some time. Later, some people who served as army chiefs for Kakatiya kingdom united the Telugu people and recovered Warangal from the Delhi Sultanate and ruled for half a century. Though short-lived, they induced a sense of unity among all the other Andhra kingdoms. They would be called the Musunuri Nayaks. Two patriotic souls, Anaya Mantri and Kolani Rudradeva, exhorted and united the Nayaks and instilled a sense of sacrifice to protect the Telugu country and Hindu Dharma. A valiant Nayak hailing from Vengi in modern-day West Godavari district was chosen as their leader. He was Musunuri Prolanidu. Prolanidu galvanized the Nayaks with his organizational skills. Battles were fought at all levels at a great cost, and independence was achieved after many sacrifices. Prolanidu liberated Warangal by 1326 and drew away the Muslims from the Telugu country. Many of the inscriptions glorify the victories of Prolaya and the statecraft he practiced. Inspired by the victories of Prolanidu and his cousin Kapanidu, other kingdoms like Kampili, Hoysala, Dwarasamudram and Aravidu asserted independence. After the Musunuri clan fell, the Reddi dynasty ruled parts of Andhra. In the time frame of about 100 years in which they continued the legacy of the Andhra, peace and literature blossomed during that period, and that's because of the stability preferred by the Reddi kings. Ganapati Reddi lived during the 13th century. He is famous for his Ranganatha Ramayanam. His translation of the Ramayana was a pioneering work. One of the famous kings of the Reddi dynasty was Pralaya Reddi. His famous inscriptions from his time period state, "I restored all the agraharas of Brahmins, which had been taken away by the evil Muslim kings. I am indeed an Agastya to the ocean which was made of the Muslim." Pralaya Reddi commissioned major repairs to the Sri Salem Mallikarjuna Swami temple and had a flight of steps built from the Krishna river to the temple. He also had the Sri Mahavishnu temple at Ahobilam repaired. The restoration of peace starting with his reign brought about a revival of literature and the arts. Erranna, the translator of the Mahabharata, lived during this period. Yerrapragada of Kavitraya, the three poets' fame, was the court poet of Pralaya Reddi. He is famous for his Telugu rendition of the Aranya Parva, left incomplete by Nannaya Bhattu. Erranna's translation of the Ramayana in Chappu form, a style of poetry, has been lost. The great poet Kavi Sarvabhauma Srinada was a poet in the Reddi code. But as it was always happening, the caste-based politics and wars devastated this dynasty, as they were in constant wars with Recharla Velama chiefs and Gajapatis of Orissa. In later years, they would settle as vassals of Golconda Muslim kings. Meanwhile, two cousins, who are believed to be part from the Kakatiya dynasty, were actively assisting other kings to achieve freedom from the Sultanate. Harihara and Bukka, who were captured at Warangal by Ulugh Khan and converted to Islam, were sent by the Sultan to suppress the rebellion of the Hoysala king. The brothers, however, switched sides and went on to establish the greatest empire of Andhra, under which Andhra would progress in all aspects. And in that empire, they say, the diamonds were sold on the streets. The most important and unfortunately the last truly Andhra empire, whose presence can still be found in the current state of Andhra. The Vijayanagara, the city of victory. The size of this city I do not write here, because it cannot all be seen from any one spot. But I climbed a hill, whence I could see a great part of it. I could not see it all because it lies between several ranges of hills. What I saw from thence seemed to me as large as Rome, and very beautiful to the sight. There were many groves of trees within it, in the gardens of the houses, and many conduits of water which flow into the midst of it. This was the description of a foreign traveller, Domingo Paes. He was a Portuguese traveller who visited Vijayanagara Empire around the year 1520. Referred as the Kingdom of Bisnaga by the Portuguese, Vijayanagara was a South Indian empire based in the Deccan Plateau. Established in 1336 by Harihara I and his brother Bukkaraya I, it lasted until 1646, although its power declined after a major military defeat in 1565 by the Deccan Sultanates. The empire is named after its capital city of Vijayanagara, whose impressive ruins surround modern Hampi, now a World Heritage Site in modern Karnataka, India. The writings of medieval European travelers such as Domingo Paes and the literature in local vernaculars provide crucial information about its history. The pace at which the empire grew was astounding and dwarfed other empires by its sheer splendor, both in terms of culture, governance, and architecture. In the first 2 decades after the founding of the empire, Harihara I gained control over most of the area south of the Tungabhadra river and earned the title of Purva Paschima Samudradishwara, master of eastern and western seas. By 1374, Bukkaraya I, successor to Harihara I, had defeated the chiefdom of Arcot, the Reddi dynasty of Kondavidu, the Sultan of Madurai, and gained control over Goa in the west and the Tungabhadra Krishna River Doab in the north. The island of Lanka paid tributes and ambassadors were exchanged with the Ming dynasty of China. The original capital was the Principality of Anagondi on the northern banks of the Tungabhadra river. It was later moved to nearby Vijayanagara on the river's southern banks during the reign of Bukkaraya I. With the Vijayanagara kingdom now imperial in stature, Harihara II, the second son of Bukkaraya I, further consolidated the kingdom beyond the Krishna river and brought the whole of South India under the Vijayanagara umbrella. His form of governance was for the people and by the people, a predecessor to the modern form of governance, and even today we may draw some good ideas for governance from his time of rule. The empire's economy was largely dependent on agriculture. Corn, jawar, cotton and pulse legumes grew in semi-arid regions, while sugarcane, rice and wheat thrived in the rainy areas. Betel leaves, areca for chewing and coconut were the principal cash crops, and large-scale cotton production supplied the weaving centers of the empire's vibrant textile industry. The empire's capital city, Mala. You can still find the clear stamp of Vijayanagara Empire on every sculpture of Tirumala temple. The Tirumala town, which was planned by Krishna Devaraya, still exists in almost exact shape and size. It was during the same time that another great composer of early Carnatic music, Annamacharya, composed hundreds of kirtanas in Telugu at Tirupati in present-day Andhra Pradesh. And it was these kirtanas that gave Telugu a significant place in Andhra history. Krishna Devarayulu's reign was the golden age of Telugu literature. 8 poets known as Ashtadiggajalu. These 8 poets were the 8 pillars of his literary assembly. It was Sri Krishna Devaraya who coined the famous term Desa Bhashalayandu Telugu Lessa. Of all the languages of the country, Telugu is the best. And that in turn made the Portuguese and the other foreigners call Telugu as the Italian of the East. For about 200 years, from the early part of the 16th century to the end of the 17th century. Sultan Quli Qutub Shah, the founder of the dynasty, served the Bahmanis faithfully and was appointed governor of Telangana in 1496. He declared independence after the death of his patron king Muhammad Shah in 1518. Aurangzeb, the Mughal emperor in 1687, invaded Golconda and annexed it to his empire. He appointed a Nizam, governor, and thus for about a period of 35 years, this region was ruled by the Mughal Nizams. The Asafjah dynasty had only 7 rulers. However, there was a period of 13 years after the rule of the first Nizam when 3 of his sons, Nasir Jung, Muzaffar Jung and Salabat Jung ruled. They were not officially recognized as the rulers. A legend about the first Nizam states that on one of his hunting trips, he was offered some kulchas, an Indian bread, by a holy man, and was asked to eat as many as he could. The Nizam could eat 7 kulchas, and the holy man then prophesied that 7 generations of his family would rule the state. The Nizams stand by an honored Hyderabad tradition that no Nizam has ever left India, no matter how good a reason might exist for doing so. They believed the sovereign is too precious to his people ever to leave India. Aurangzeb died in 1707 and the administrative machinery of the Mughal imperial regime began to crumble, and it gradually lost control over the provinces. It enabled 2 foreign mercantile companies to consolidate themselves as political powers, capable of subsequently playing decisive roles in shaping the destiny of the nation. They were the East India Company of England and the Compagnie des Indes Orientales of France.